This video takes a closer look at the routing capabilities of the software control panel for the Orion32 The routing matrix on the software control panel has two sections. The From section includes the following connections. The line-ins represent the 32 physical line-ins of the Orion32 on 4 D-sub-25 connectors. Thunderbolt TB play outputs and USB play outputs stand for playback and are the outputs from your DAW, and therefore from your computer. So if you route a stereo track from your DAW to outputs 1 and 2, for example, this track will be outputted from your USB play or Thunderbolt play channels 1 and 2, depending on whether you're using USB or Thunderbolt. Also note that TB or USB playback channels 1 and 2 are your main stereo output channels for your computer, the same as you would use for a media player, for example. The ADAT and SPDIF inputs represent the physical inputs on the Orion32 The AFX out represents the outputs from the software effects processors on the Effects tab, so if you route a source to the effects, the signal will be output here. Lastly, we have the 4 software mixer stereo outputs. In the 2 section we have 32 line outs that represent the physical line outs of the 4 D-sub-25 connectors on the rear panel of the Orion32 The level of all of these outputs can be controlled by a slider on the Settings tab. The monitor outs will feed whatever you route to your monitor speakers. For example, Thunderbolt play 1 and 2, and channel 1 stands for left or 2 for right. The output level of the monitor outs can be adjusted from here. The Thunderbolt record 32 channels and USB record 24 channels represent the inputs in your DAW. Whatever you record to these channels will be sent to your DAW inputs for recording. For example, line-in channels 1 to 12 will be input channels 1 to 12 in your DAW. The ADAT and SPDIF outputs represent the physical outputs for each protocol. The AFX ins are the inputs for each one of the 16 channels of the software effects processors. And finally we have the 4 software mixer inputs, each one of them with 32 channels. The routing matrix also features an undo and redo function to help you to route. The save and load function helps you to store and recall your custom-made presets. It also features 5 presets to store your setups. You can use them by simply holding the control key on a PC or the command key on a Mac and clicking on the preset of your choice. By double-clicking on a channel in the From section, you can rename it, and by right-clicking on a channel on the To section, you can mute or assign one of the oscillators to it. Renaming can be very useful in larger, more complex setups. To route, simply drag and drop channels from the From section to the To section. To select multiple tracks, simply hold the Shift key while left-clicking a selection. Note that the channels on the To section will receive the color and the name, if renamed, from the From section, enabling you to easily see which channels are routed to where. Now we will explain 2 basic setups that the Orion32 can be used for. On a recording setup we would do the following. You can route any type of input that you want to use for recording from the From section to the Thunderbolt Rec channels on the To section. If you're using USB, you'll need to follow the same steps below, but instead of Thunderbolt Rec, to use USB Rec. For example, line-ins 1 to 32 to USB Rec 1 to 32. When connected via USB, if you can't see 32 USB channels, then you'll need to change the USB mode from the Settings tab from 24 to 32. You can also route MADI-in channels to the Orion32 from another interface or a digital desk, or ADAT inputs or SPDIF inputs. The same goes for the AFX outs. If you want to use the antelope effects such as compressor or EQ, you can route the AFX outputs to the Thunderbolt Rec inputs for recording. On a playback or mixing out of the box setup, you need to do the following. If using Thunderbolt, route the Thunderbolt play outputs that represent your DAW outputs to the appropriate outputs of your choice from the Orion. Your output 1 from your DAW will be Thunderbolt play 1, and output 16 from your DAW will be Thunderbolt play 16 on the Orion32 If you want to use the analog outputs of the Orion to mix on an analog desk, for example, you'll need to route Thunderbolt play to line out. For example, Thunderbolt play 1 to 32 will be routed to line out 1 to 32. Also note that the Orion32 has a pair of monitor outs. If you're recording using only one stereo output from your DAW for listening and monitoring, you can simply drag and drop Thunderbolt Play or USB Play 1 and 2 to this stereo output. Note that outputs 1 and 2 are the outputs from your DAW. Another approach is to use one of the software mixers in the Orion32 Plus. You can do this by simply dragging and dropping Thunderbolt Play channels to Mix 1 channels, for example. Then route Mix 1 left and right from the From section to the monitor outs. Then you can adjust the levels of the mix from Mixer 1. This also includes Reverb. Lastly, if you want to use the AFX, you'll need to route the Thunderbolt Play channels, your DAW output, to the AFX ins. Then route the AFX outs to whichever outputs you require. These basic details will help you to implement the countless possibilities of the Orion32 Plus and its routing options. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos on this topic.